Hey everyone, welcome to our small footprint. Got some food prep again for you today, but I also thought I'd share. So we have been sharing the plans to move the chicken pen, and we've just had a few delays in getting materials to get it all done. So at the moment it's still looking like a couple of weeks, and I did buy all the berry bushes and stuff that I want to put where the old chicken pen is, and they're all just sitting in temporary pots and they're too small. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to pot them all up into some larger pots just to get them through another however long it takes us before we get the ground sorted where we can put them out where they're going to stay forever. So for the moment we just need to get them potted up a little bit. The pots that they come in aren't really suitable for long term, and they're too small, so they don't hold moisture for very long, so they're drying out, and I have to make sure they're watered, which you have to do anyway, but just a little more than usual. So I'm going to pot them up. So what I did was I found some of the big pots from when I've bought trees that have come in proper pots, and I'm going to use these to pot the smaller ones up in. So I thought I'd bring you along and show you while I do that. So these are the Everton Raspberries. I've got more inside, and see they came in these cardboard pots, and they're not meant for, it says you leave it in the box for a few weeks. Well, it's definitely been a few weeks now, so I'm just going to pull it out because these roots are starting to show a lot of growth around the edges here, and I just think that they will do better in a pot. So you can see there's some yellowing of the leaves here and stuff too, which is showing that it's lacking some nutrients. So this soil that I'm using here is one that we use a lot of because we can get it fairly easily here, and it has compost and some manures and some minerals and all that sort of stuff in it. So this will give it a boost until we can get it in the ground. So I'm just going to do that with the rest of them, and then water them, put them aside so that they have somewhere happy to sit until such time as we get the next lot done. I pulled the other plants out to pot out, and I've discovered we've had some bush rats in underneath the patio, and they've been eating the roots out of my plants. No wonder they're not looking real healthy. All I can do is pot them up and hope that it recovers. It's really quite frustrating. They're expensive, and it's just... I started the morning with shaping the dough that I had put in the fridge that I had let rise overnight, proof overnight. This is the Food Bod master dough. She has some great tips and stuff on her Instagram and things like that. It's a really simple dough mix which works really well on days that I just want to throw something together, all done in the bowl, stretch and folds all done in the bowl, all that sort of thing. Sometimes I have huge success with it, sometimes not so much, but I'm not particularly fussy about my bread. Not really. We use it as accordingly depending on how it turns out. So I did 2 loaves of it last night, and then left it outside on the bench for a while, and then brought it in a bit later because we had the fire on. I didn't want it to overproof, so I didn't want to bring it in too early. Left it out of the way of the fire overnight and pulled it back out this morning. So this morning it's only 5 degrees in my kitchen, mind you, but I didn't want to let the dough go too far. So all I do is I stretch it into a ball in the bowl and then tip it out onto the dough mat, and then I shape it accordingly. So I just made these into rounds. So I just pulled them all to the middle and then dragged them along the mat to give them a nice tight skin on the surface. I don't have any bannetons because bannetons tend to go mouldy here. It doesn't matter what I do, they go mouldy. So what I did is I found these metal colanders that are about the right size. I think I got them from Kmart, but don't quote me on that. And I use a tea towel in them. So I just put a tea towel inside the metal colander and I sprinkle it with semolina. You can use rice flour. You just want to use something that's not a wheat flour because the dough will just absorb it and stick. So I use semolina, just sprinkle it over the tea towel and then place the dough into the tea towel, sprinkle a little bit more of the semolina on top so that the tea towel doesn't stick as it does its final time in the fridge. and then I cover it up and I stick it in the fridge. Now I'm going to bake these tonight. Ideally you'd leave them 24 hours in the fridge, but my timing was a bit off, and that's fine. So I have put these in the fridge, and I will pull them out again at about 4 o'clock so that I can cook them to have with dinner. I made another batch of the baked oatmeal today, so I mixed this up last night and got it ready to go for this morning. I'm still not entirely happy with the ratios of what I've been using, so I'm not going to share as such, but I've bumped up the egg quantity and doubled the oats and things like that, and it's almost there, it's getting there, so I will keep on working with it, and if I can get it how I like it, then I'll share that, and then you can use that, or you can use it however you like it, but this is working on how it works for us. So I want 6 good sized servings out of it for the kids, and I want it to be able to be pulled out a bit like a slice so that we can put yogurt and stuff over the top, and I'm getting there, so we'll see. The other thing we really love is Dutch baby pancakes, but we don't have the eggs at the moment, so this is sort of something that I'm compromising on to try and make work as well while we don't have the eggs, and then I'll probably go back to the Dutch babies when we have a glut of eggs again. So I started fiddling with the biscuits recipe again. The last ones were just a bit too soft, they were a bit too cakey, and I want them to be more like biscuits, so I'm still tweaking the recipe to see what works for us to get them to the taste that I want them to be, get them to the texture that I want them to be. The taste was fine, they're just not quite the right texture, so I was working on that. I did get interrupted though. There was a child who came and asked me to make him hummus while I was started, so I had to do that. So I have some hummus that I canned last year, I think it is, and it's classed as instant hummus in a jar, and it's from a book. I will find the title of the book, I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it's in a book, and you can the chickpeas and toasted sesame seeds and garlic and everything else all in a jar, and then when you want to make the hummus, all you do is you pour the jar into your blender and add a little bit of olive oil, a bit of lemon juice and salt, and just blend it up, and you've got hummus. So the kids weren't real keen on it when I first did it, because I used to buy this one specific brand of store-bought hummus all the time, but Costco stopped stocking that brand of hummus, and I decided that I would just stop buying store-bought, and they would have to get used to using the homemade stuff. I don't know that I would do it this way again. I think maybe I would prefer to just can the chickpeas and use the chickpeas and some tahini and things like that, rather than having it like this. It is hard to get it smooth. The kids seem to like it, but it's not perfect, but it does work, and we will use up the rest of the jars on the shelf before I swap over to anything else, and it comes out nice and smooth so long as you take the effort. I do have to use the Thermomix though, which means that I have to mix up 2 jars at a time, because there's just not enough quantity of it. If I only do 1 jar, it just doesn't blend up properly because there's not enough quantity in the bowl, so I always have to do a double batch, which means I have to make sure that the kids finish it rather than some of it gets wasted. So once I'd done that, I went back to the biscuits and just threw everything in, and added coconut this time, dropped the sugar a little bit, bumped the molasses, used plenty of coconut oil, used the sourdough starter as well this time, changed the ratios of eggs to oats and things like that. I just fiddled with the recipe a bit to see how it'd go. It came out into a nice, really thick dough, so I don't think they're going to spread very well, but we'll give them a go, and then I might have to back off the flour for the next one so that it's a bit wetter, so that it spreads better, but this is what I did this time, and we're going to try them out and see how it goes. I got interrupted while I was rolling, well, not really interrupted, I had other tasks that had to be done while I was rolling out biscuits, so Darryl and I were sitting there and sorting worksheets out for the kids for the day that they needed to do, and sorting piles of sheets into relevant year levels for them so that they could do some schoolwork at the table while I was rolling out biscuits. And so we sorted those. I tend to print out large swathes of worksheets, and then we catalogue them and we use them appropriately depending on what we're working on during that week. The kids really like sheets. It's annoying to have to use so much paper, but I'm going to get myself a shredder, I think, and I'm going to use them with some paraffin to make fire starters. We used to use sawdust, but if I don't have to buy sawdust, if I can use shredded paper instead, that will work well. So I've been keeping all the paper aside to use for that. We can also use it on the compost and everything else. It's not like it gets wasted as such, but it's still annoying having all that paper. But the kids really like worksheets, so that's what we do. For dinner tonight, I decided to make lasagna soup. So we had that bread, so I thought that lasagna soup would go really well with it. There is a recipe for lasagna soup on Carlsbad Cravings, which is sort of where I got the idea from. I don't really follow the recipe, but the recipe sounds nice. I sort of make my bolognese, but with a whole lot of stock. So I do a large amount of onions and garlic and cut it all up, dice it all up really nice and fine, and I throw it in the pot and caramelize that off. So that's my first step of making my lasagna soup. So I did that and got that started. As we all know, caramelizing onion takes quite a while, so I got that started while I was still doing other things and threw that in. This is what the biscuits look like when they came out. So the first lot that are sort of puffy domes at the back, I didn't flatten them on the baking tray at all. I just left them as balls, and they definitely didn't spread out very much. So these are a bit softer than I want. So the next lot I flattened out with the back of a spoon, and these are definitely closer to what I'm looking for with that crunchy texture. So I might back off the flour. The next lot, make the dough a little wetter and see if they spread a little bit better by themselves, and then it might be perfect. These were still probably a little too sweet. I think I need to back off the sugar again a little bit on them for us, but I think I'm pretty close to getting there with these. So after all the onion and garlic was caramelized for the lasagna soup, then I added the mince and just stood there and broke it up like you do with mince. Break it up and get it all browned off into the onion and garlic. It doesn't have to be small, it can have chunks in it. It's a soup, so it doesn't really matter what the texture of the meat is. It's however you prefer it to be. So in mine, I added a jar of my homemade pasta sauce, which is just a whole lot of vegetables and tomatoes and all sorts of things, pasta sauce, into the pot. I also added a jar of my just straight roasted tomatoes and a little container of tomato paste, then a whole lot of stock. So this is the stock that I made yesterday or the day before, the stock that had the roasted chicken pieces in it, and so it's a really caramelly coloured, nice smelling, fairly fatty stock, which is perfect for this, which is why I decided to make it. So I didn't can these, I just stuck them in the jars in the fridge because I knew I was going to use them. So I poured stock in. Now I think I poured 3 jars of it, so 3 litres of stock into this to start with, and then brought it up to boil and simmered it for quite a while. I did add some seasonings. I added some salt and pepper, a sprinkle of raw sugar, some Worcestershire sauce, some balsamic vinegar, Italian herbs, a bit of paprika, I think, all the standard sort of stuff that I would use in my bolognese. Added them all to the sauce as well and let it simmer for a couple of hours for that soup mix. So it hit about 3:30, I think, around about 3:30 I think it was, that I decided to get the dough into the oven. So I pulled the dough out of the fridge, I turned it out onto baking paper and then scored it. So the dough looks like it could have been proofed a little bit longer, but it's pretty good. It's bouncing back nicely. It's got some good bubbles in the scoring and things like that. So we will bake it regardless, and it's to eat with soup anyway, so it's not as big a deal. So I scored the dough and stuck it in the oven. Now I went to add ice cubes for steam into the oven, but the kids left all the ice cube trays in the freezer empty, so there was no steam in this batch, so it probably won't rise quite as well as it could, but it will still be perfectly fine to eat with the soup. I decided to make my pasta for the soup using my Philips extruder machine. I could have rolled it out, but I tend to use this if I'm not using sourdough. So you can't use sourdough pasta in this extruder. You just cannot get the dough the right consistency to work with an extruder, or I can't. So we use the extruder only for just for an egg noodle based pasta, but I don't use it that often because I find that purchasing plain dried pasta from the shop is convenient and easy, and it has no nasty ingredients in it. So I just don't see the point in spending the time to make the pasta for the kids when the kids are perfectly happy with the dried stuff. So I don't use it very often, but I have it. I used to use it a lot more, but I decided that for the lasagna soup we wanted fresh pasta because it's always nicer with fresh pasta. Most people use the lasagna sheets and they just cut them into chunks, and that's what they use in the soup. So all I did was use the fettuccine style or linguine style die to cut my pasta, and just made short strips out of the fresh pasta with the fillets machine and used that for the soup. So once I had it all gone through, and it was a 500 grams of flour with 190 mils of liquid, which is 2 eggs and water and oil mixed to the 190 mil mark. After that I added it to the soup and you simmer it. It takes about, I want to say 8 minutes for homemade pasta to get soft, especially when it's in a liquid like a stock mix. I did add more stock to that too actually, so it had simmered for a while, and then before I added the pasta I decided to add another jar of stock to bring the liquid levels up a bit before I added the pasta. So I put the stock in there, brought it back up to a boil, and then added the pasta into the soup so that the pasta will cook in the soup. It's a really rich, tasty soup. It's very nice. It's full of veggies still, and it's, I don't know, it's carb heavy especially if you have it with bread as well, but it's a very tasty soup, very comforting. It's served normally with cheese on top, which I'd imagine would be really nice. We don't do it with cheese obviously, but it would be really nice to have cheese melted through. It would be very much like eating a wet sloppy lasagna, I suppose. So the bread came out of the oven. It did well, so that's fine. I sliced it up. I'm slicing it hot here, so it's, you shouldn't slice sourdough hot, but we were having it with soup and that's what we wanted. So, but it doesn't slice very easily when it's hot. The crust is a little hard. It'd soften with a bit of time, but it's a bit hard straight out of the oven. So yeah, it didn't slice very neatly, but it was perfectly tasty. The crumb is a little dense, and I put that down to no steam in the oven, and it's slightly underproofed, but it was very, very yummy to eat with the soup, and we have an extra loaf to eat tomorrow, so that works out well. So thank you very much for watching today, and as usual I'm more than happy to answer any questions in the comments or just have conversations in the comments. If you comment, I will answer, and I will see you again in another couple of days.